because I am not here over the next 2 days. So I'm going to run you through this PowerPoint and today's lecture. Then at the end of this, there is a little mini project for you all to do, which I'm sure you're very excited about. I think it should be fun, more fun than you guys actually think it is. So we're still working on cognition and language, and today we're going to take a quick look at decision making. So we're going to look at a lot of biases that go along with decision making as well today. Okay, so here we go. This is where we are, decision making. These are the 4 categories which we'll be looking at today. You guys ready? Okay, here we go. So, in a more organized manner of what we'll be looking at, I think this stuff, we've heard of some of you guys have more of a background in this than others. Overconfidence, confirmation bias, belief perseverance, and hindsight bias. We all like biases. I don't know what's the correct terminology for that. And I think these will, this will help us out a little bit in some tests that we've seen these terms. So, problems and decisions. So problem solving is the task to come up with new solutions. Decision making, on the other hand, is a type of problem solving which we already know the possible options, something we have a background in. We know what we're not looking for a solution like in problem solving. We already know, and we have to make a decision between one of the possible solutions. I'm sure you guys, nothing new, just something you actually have to think about for a second. Okay? Well, actually, let's take a look at this boy. The boy, he has to pick out, does he want a hamburger or an apple? Hamburger or an apple? He has to make a decision, right? I guess it depends on what mood you're in. Sometimes you might want the hamburger, sometimes you might want the apple. Okay, so heuristics in decision making. We talked about heuristics yesterday. How do these impact decision making? So shortcuts learned from experience that people use to make decisions, typically when facing complex problems or incomplete information. So we have several assumptions that we make with these. There's 2 types of heuristics in which we use in decision making. We use availability heuristics and representative heuristics. Okay, so let's take a look at both of what these are. Representativeness in heuristics. You make a decision based upon how much something represents or matches up with characteristics from your schema or the typical case. So remember, we're using schemas of prior knowledge we have about something that have a positive influence on us to make a decision. So if you are looking at universities and this idea of a party school matches up with this idea that it's a bad school. It can't be a good school if it's a party school. So this would fall under bad school for some of you. Or for some of you, maybe you have schema that tell you that if it's a party school, work hard, play hard saying maybe matches up with a good school. Okay? So it represents what you have in terms of your own schema. Okay, other things. So we make judgments about people based on schema that we already have. This is from, what's that movie called? I forget. Some of you guys might be able to nail it. But you look at this man, what are your schema going to tell you? They're going to tell you that he's from, probably California or Hawaii, and he's a surfer dude. Why do we say he's from California or Hawaii? Blonde hair, surfboard, longboard, definitely Californian, right? This dude, he's my favorite. First thing you're probably going to say is redneck. He's probably from Montana, Wyoming, Maine. Why do we say this? From schema that we have that represent our belief that tell us maybe something about this person. Who's this guy? What is he from? I don't know. Think about it for yourself for a second. Maybe England? Maybe the Wild West? I mean, he has an eyepiece. His top hat is not really typical in modern society. So where does he come from? Okay? So these are representative in terms of your schema. So a little example here. Susan is very shy and withdrawn, invariably helpful, but with little interest in people or in the world of reality. A meek and tidy soul, she has a need for order and structure and a passion for detail. Is Susan a librarian, a teacher, or a lawyer? What do you think based upon what you have learned about what a librarian is like, what a teacher is like, what a lawyer is like? Think about it for yourself for a second, and see if you agree with me in this term. I'll give you a second. Okay, a second. I would say maybe she is a librarian based upon this. Librarians always seem very, they don't need people. They just need books, and they have a passion for detail. They need all the books to be in order. That's what my schema represent to me in this situation. Another example. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Is Linda a bank teller, or is Linda a feminist bank teller? What is a feminist, right? This description is going to try and describe to us what a feminist actually is. So most likely you're probably going to say a feminist bank teller. You can still be a bank teller, but she's a feminist bank teller. Okay, so now, tell me if these are truths or lies about myself, okay? You have to figure if these are true. Something that happened to me during grade school. I got into a fight in the bathroom, and my first grade teacher didn't break it up. Is that true or a lie? You have to use your schema about me to figure out if this is true. My favorite meal is sushi at the California Grill. My earliest memory is my fourth birthday party. My favorite vacation trip, Disney. My high point of my high school days, football. My most influential person in my life, my mom. My favorite teacher, Mr. Day, my ELA teacher. The part of the country in which I'd most like to live, the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. A surprising talent that I have, cooking. Something interesting about a member of my family, my only sister is a concert pianist. How many of these are true or lies about me? What do you think? What representative schema do you have about me? How much do you know? What do you think? Okay. On the other hand now, we're going to take a look at availability heuristics. This is looking at the schema that are present, something that you can pick up on immediately. So operates when we make decisions on how available information is. The faster people can remember an instance of some event, the more they expect it to occur. Okay, so this actually affects you in everyday life. So let's see some of these in action. Which household chores do you do more frequently than your partner? So this would be like my wife. Example, washing dishes or taking out the trash. Wives reported 16 out of 20 chores. Husbands reported 16 out of 20 chores. They're the same. Why would both wives and husbands report the same? Do they really do the same amount of chores? This is in 1979, by the way, this study too. So in 1979, who do you think probably did more chores? But why is it that husbands would report as many chores completed as women? What about it? Okay? Why does this happen? Because of availability. So I remember lots of instances of taking out the trash, washing dishes, but I do not remember lots of instances of my wife doing it also. I remember myself doing it, but I don't remember my wife doing it. So you remember things that you do yourself, but you don't necessarily remember what other people do. You're more worried about your own instances rather than anybody else. So in this case, the wife would do the same thing and they would have the same amount of chores reported. Okay, so why does our availability heuristics lead us astray? Why are they wrong sometimes? Whatever increases the ease of retrieving information increases its perceived availability. So let's take some examples of this here soon. How is retrieval facilitated? How recently we have heard about an event and how distinct it is. So how recently we heard about something. This is how recently is it in our mind, and this affects our retrieval of it. Okay, so you can't see this, but it said, okay, I'm sorry about that. We had a little malfunction. Hold on here. Okay, so when cases of death per 1,000 people, so how many people die per 1,000 in these events? All accidents or strokes. Okay, so how common are accidents or strokes in the death of people? Blood poisonings or suicides per 1,000 people. How often do these occur? Homicide or diabetes. How often do homicides or diabetes occur per 1,000? Which one is more common? Homicides or diabetes? Blood poisonings or suicide? Which one is more common? Motor vehicle accidents or colorectal cancer? Which one is more common? Which one kills more people per 1,000 deaths? Leukemia or drowning? Which one kills more people per 1,000 deaths? So, we have exaggerated fear, because the opposite of overconfidence is having an exaggerated fear about what may happen. Such fears may be unfounded. So we have fears about something that are so almost impossible to happen again, but yet people worry about them oftentimes so much. For example, the 9/11 attacks on the US led to a 20% decline in airline travel due to fear. 800 more people would die if they drove just half those miles. I think a lot of you have heard this before. It is much, 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 much safer to fly across the United States than it is to drive across the United States. The likelihood that a plane crashes is so minute compared to a car accident. It's incredible. Actually, in Taiwan, that would be even, I think, probably quite a bit even more so the case, because there's a lot more car accidents in Taiwan than there are in the United States. So, it's an exaggerated fear because we hear about a plane going down, especially now. We just had the AirAsia flight go down. People say, oh my God, we can go down, but still the likelihood of that happening again is so minute. There are thousands of flights a day, and how rarely a plane goes down, it makes your chance of actually dying in a plane crash very, very low. Okay, so the things we looked at. All accidents, 35.7 deaths per 1,000. Strokes, 57.4. More strokes kill people than accidents. Suicides, 10.4. Blood poisonings, 11.4. Bet you wouldn't have guessed that, but you hear about suicides a lot more. Homicides, 7.1. Diabetes kills almost 4 times as many people as murders. Motor vehicle accidents, 15. This type of rare cancer, 19. Drownings, 1.1. Leukemia, 7.8. Yet parents are so worried about drownings, yet how rare they actually happen compared to leukemia or any of these others. People have irrational fears because of the news and what we see that happens. So, now let's take a look here. Which cities have the higher crime index? So which cities have a higher crime rate for the size of their cities? Detroit or Myrtle Beach? Which one has a higher crime rate? Chicago or Baltimore? Manhattan or Gary, Indiana, middle of nowhere? Boston or Flint? Montreal or Hot Springs? San Francisco or Durham? The answers are Detroit, 531, Myrtle Beach, which is like this vacation spot in South Carolina. Baltimore has more crime than Chicago. Gary, Indiana has 5 times as much crime, or 4 times as much crime, as Manhattan. Go figure. Flint has more crime than Boston. Flint is a tiny little city, but it's a really dangerous little city. Hot Springs versus Montreal. Durham versus San Francisco. Ooh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back here. So, Just because you hear something, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is more dangerous. People oftentimes have exaggerated fear over things that are not that common to actually happen. So we're going to look at some biases now. First one is overconfidence. Overconfidence is a tendency to overestimate the accuracy of our beliefs and judgments. At a stock market, both the seller and buyer may be confident about their decisions on the stock market. Remember, when someone sells something on the stock market, someone also has to buy that. So both people have to be confident in their decisions to do that. Somebody is probably right and somebody is probably wrong. Confirmation bias. While we make a decision, we actively look for information that confirms our ideas. This is a big problem in studies, right? We talk about confirmation bias with psychologists who want to confirm their hypothesis. So they're looking for things that do confirm it, not the other way around. They're spending all this time and money on something. They want their ideas to be proven to be true. Belief bias is the tendency of one's pre-existing beliefs to distort logical reasonings by making invalid conclusions. So, Democrats support free speech. Dictators are not Democrats. Dictators do not support free speech. You've probably heard this one. God is love. Love is blind. Ray Charles is blind. Ray Charles is God. Follow the logic. Does it make sense? Is this a logical conclusion based off of the first conclusion? First belief, should I say, not conclusion. Something to think about. We more easily see the illogic of conclusions that run counter to our beliefs than those that agree with our own beliefs. Okay? So, let's move on. Belief perseverance is the tendency to cling to our beliefs in the face of contrary evidence. I am not stubborn. I am right. Most people who are stubborn would say, I'm not stubborn, I'm just correct. This is not an uncommon thing here. Okay? So you are perseverant in something that you probably maybe shouldn't necessarily be. I think a lot of people are guilty of this at some time or another. Okay, bias after the process. So hindsight bias, a tendency to think that one would have known actual events were coming before they happened. So had one been present then or had reason to pay attention, aka Monday morning's quarterback. I knew it all along effect, reflecting a common response to the surprise. So the Monday morning quarterback effect is when people try and pick professional football games in America, they say, oh, I knew that, I could have told you that. Obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles were going to beat the New York Giants. It's very easy to say something after the fact that it occurs. So we call this the hindsight bias because people are always, hindsight is, 50-50. You can say, oh yeah, obviously that is the case, but was it obvious before it happened? I think most of you have probably experienced this at one point or another. Okay, so getting to the end here. Decision-making and judgments. Decision-making and judgments are special cases of problem solving in which possible solutions or choices are already known. Remember, logical decision-making is the compensatory model. So rational decision-making model in which choices are systematically evaluated on various criteria. Example would be buying a car, okay? Good when issues are well defined. So this is a good thing when you know exactly what you want. Okay, so now for your project, I already kind of told you about it, but this is kind of it in writing. Using the information on this PowerPoint and your textbook and internet sources if you want, you will create a short skit demonstrating one element from this. You will need to film your skit and we will watch them on Monday. This does not need to be professionally made. It doesn't need to be super fancy, just good enough to explain one of these, okay? The 4 categories are here. Choose one of them in a group of 3. Your skit should be no longer than 3 minutes. I don't want this to be super, super long. It should be fun and it should demonstrate the idea. It can be funny, but make sure it demonstrates the idea, okay? Make it clear, okay? I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of the week and weekend, and I'll see you all on Monday, okay? Adios.